Hello, welcome to another edition of the VOD Weekly News Recap. I am Glorious Haddijatou Njie. Good evening. Now let's look at the headlines. The Chief Officer Njie presents EU EOM, the Gambia's final report, with key recommendations for changes for the electoral, legal and constitutional framework. Minister Ba highlights achievement and progress registered by Tourism Minister. Government orders inquest into Federalist Debt. PIRA introduces peace for vehicles. APRC contesting for parliamentary elections. Senegal unveils state-of-the-art 50,000-seater capacity. UN demands release of 4 MONUSCO soldiers. 7 killed in Ethiopia's mine collapse. Former Guinean minister jailed over corruption charges. Libya security threatens delay vote on new government. Ukraine urges citizens to leave Russia as fair mounts. Ex-police officer guilty in George Floyd's death. U.S. truckers convoy prompts National Guard development in Washington. Nicaragua court convicts government critics of conspiracy. Those were the headlines. Now let's look at the news in detail. Tuesday, 22nd February 2022, the European Union presents the Election Observation Mission's final report. The chief observer, Mr. Njie, former member of the European Parliament from Germany, said the EU Election Observation Mission positively assessed the voting and counting process on election day, but structural deficiency and critical procedural and legal gaps require fundamental reform. The EU Election Observation Mission finally reports offers 20 recommendations for the Gambian authorities, consideration and proposes essential changes to the electoral legal framework.
Recommendation during an upcoming roundtable event with several Gambian stakeholders in detail and prospects for their implementation. Finally, it is up to the Gambian authorities and stakeholders to consider these recommendations. There are also other recommendations of the Gambian citizen observers which observe the elections. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention and for attending our press conference. Thank you.
The mission recommends bringing the Election Act in line with international and regional standards and in addition to the conduct of election. Njie underlined that it is fundamental to increase the independent electoral commission capacity and transparency in critical areas, including the establishment of specialized divisions, legal, gender. The EU EOM proposes publishing the complete presidential election results disaggregated by polling stations on its website. In addition, for all future elections, the mission suggests releasing disaggregated results during the tabulation process. Our mission also recommends that legal provision are made for continuous registration and updating of the voters' register. The European Union Election Observation Mission encourages bringing the legal framework, including the Constitution, the Criminal Code, and the Information and Communication Act, in line with the country's international and regional commitments on freedom of expression. Minister Ba highlights achievement and progress registered by Tourism Ministry, IDASOL reports.
The Tourism Minister Ahmed Ba on Tuesday called for a press conference held at the ministry's conference hall in Banjul, outlining some of his achievements. Ahmed Ba informed the press that the latest flight operations to the Gambia is Njie, Netherlands, that started its operation on 19 February with a Boeing 737-800 series after 2 years of absence due to the COVID-19 pandemic. He added that it will operate all year round and planes are on the way to increase tour group flight frequency to 12 flights per week for the 2022 and 2023 winter tourism season. 6 flights from Holland, 2 flights from Belgium, and 4 flights from UK. Minister Ba added that Destination Gambia currently received 53 planes per week at the Banjul International Airport, both chartered 15 flights and schedules 37 flights per week respectively. He went on to add that the minister, in collaboration with the GT board, had coordinated on serious occasions vaccination campaign and exercise in various locations in the tourism department area for employees for the tourism industry to be vaccinated in order to boost customers' confidence on Destination Gambia as safe to travel. All throughout the period, my ministry have been working hand in glove with our stakeholders, paving the way to the opening of the tourism industry, and here we are today, witnessing the arrival of the chartered flight for the first time since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, for the first time in the history of the Gambia, we are witnessing Air France to the Gambia daily, Minister Bass said.
This is Haddijatou Njie reporting for VOD.
Government orders inquest into Federalist Debt. Haddijatou Njie reports.
The Attorney General has written a request to the Chief Justice ordering an inquest into the death of Dada Fadera, the former Gambian ambassador to the United States. Since the ambassador died on Sunday at the Edward Francis Small Teaching Hospital, circulation has been making the round that he has been poisoned. However, the VOD saw a copy of an official letter from the AG's chamber addressed to the Chief Justice ordering an inquest into his death. The letter reads, "Following circumstances which rise to the reasonable suspicions with regards to the cause of death of Dada Fadera, the Honorable Attorney General, acting under Section 11 of the Corona Act, Camp 7, Laws of the Gambia, would like your leadership to order an inquest touching on the death of their Dada Fadera." In response, the Chief Justice assigned Principal Magistrate C.D. Jabate of the Banjul Magistrate Court asked the coroner to inquest into the death. Dada Fadera was born in Nema, Kiang East, and attended Muslim high school before bagging degrees in Sierra Leone and Britain. He served as a permanent secretary and head of the civil service before being appointed as the Gambia ambassador to Washington.
This is Haddijatou Njie reporting for VOD.
PIRA introduces an online database for all tankers called PIRA Information System for tankers trucks for the renewal of inspection for petroleum road tankers trucks. According to PIRA, this system allows them to keep track of all vehicle licensing and inspection regimes, and that each vehicle would now be issued with an electronic identifier as part of the new inspection regime. All tanker truck operators, the public companies and individuals who are in the business of petroleum bulk transport by road from the storage depot to petroleum service stations to file in new inspection applications for their vehicles, PIRA said. PIRA further stated that the application fee remains the same. However, all previously tested vehicles that failed their inspection test would pay the full cost of the retest. PIRA warns that any transporter who fails to apply by the 18th March 2022 will face enforcement action, which may include not being allowed access to the respective depot. APRC contesting 4 parliamentary elections. Haddijatou Njie reports.
The National Executive Committee of the Alliance for Patriotic Reorientation and Construction, APRC, under the leadership of Honorable Fabakary Tombong Jatta, chairman and party leader of APRC, announced its intention to be part of the contestants in the forthcoming parliamentary elections, which is already scheduled to take place on the 9th April. APRC list of constituencies are 1. Bundung Kankunda constituency in Kanifing Municipality, Old Joswan constituency in Kanifing Municipality, Fonyi Carroll constituency in West Coast region, Fonyi Bondali constituency in the West Coast region, Fonyi Kansala constituency in the West Coast region, and Fonyi Burefet constituency in the West Coast region, and lastly Fonyi Bontong constituency in the West Coast region.
This is Aissatou Sow reporting for VOD.
Senegal unveils state-of-the-art 50,000-seater capacity stadium. Aissatou Sow reports.
Thousands of Senegalese gathered on Tuesday for an inauguration of the 50,000-seated stadium. The stadium is in Njie, a town being built about 30 meters from the capital, Dakar. The venue was named in honor of the former president, Abdoulaye Wade. The new stadium was built in just 18 months by Turkish Soma Construction Company at a cost of 156 million francs CFA, equivalent to 270 million to 237,000 euros. President Macky Sall addressed spectators expressing his joy at being able to officially open the victory of the Lions of Teranga, the Senegalese national football team in the CAF African Cup of Nations, and that it is in this beautiful den that our vigilant Lions will celebrate their conquest of Africa and the world, Senegal President Macky Sall said. The Turkish-built stadium, constructed at a reported cost of 270 million, will host the Summer Youth Olympics in 2026 and was filled with fans waving Senegalese green, yellow and red flag. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan took part in the ceremonial kick-off ahead of the Legends game with former Senegal midfielder Kalilou Fadiga, a member of the team which reached the quarterfinal of the 2002 World Cup, scoring the first goal in the stadium. Elas Diouf, Cameroon Samuel Eto'o, Cote d'Ivoire's Drogba, former Ghana forward Ashmau Gane and ex-Nigerian striker Daniel Amakashi were among the other former professional playing. Also in attendance were the presidents of Liberia, Guinea-Bissau, Gambia, Rwanda and Germany, and as well as Gianni Infantino, the president of the World Governing Body FIFA and Confederation of Gambians Football President Patrick Monstep.
This is Aissatou Sow reporting for VOD.
The Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, on Wednesday ordered for the immediate release of 4 soldiers of the Foreign Legion of the French Army operating for the United Nations mission in Central Africa. These members of the MINUSCA enjoy privileges and immunities which are granted to them in the interest of the United Nations, Guterres said in a statement, stressing that the procedure established between the UN and the Central African Republic in the event of the suspected offenses concerning UN personnel.
Spoke in the General Assembly and said we're facing the biggest global peace and security crisis in recent years, certainly in his time as Secretary General. He told the General Assembly members that the decision by the Russian Federation to recognize the so-called independence of certain areas of Donetsk and Luhansk regions and the follow-up are violations of territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine and inconsistent with the principles of the Charter. He also added that the Minsk agreements were surviving in an intensive care unit thanks to a number of life support devices, but those devices have now been disconnected.
Had not been respected in his statement. The UN chief calls on the government of the Central African Republic to respect all its obligations under international law, including the Status of Forces Agreement, and to release this MINUSCA personnel unconditionally and without delay. At least 7 people were killed after an illegal mine collapsed in Ethiopia, Oromia regional state, officials said Tuesday. 11 others were also found themselves in a critical condition, the state broadcaster reported, citing the officials. The incident occurred as artisanal gold miners were caught up by the incident and buried underground while they were searching for gold, local government officials said. The victims were residents who had dug deep shafts in an area where Ethiopia's mining ministry had been searching for minerals. No mineral has been found from that place yet, the local authorities explained. According to the Ethiopian Ministry of Mines and Petroleum, Ethiopia had secured $682 million from the minerals and gemstones mining sectors during its 2020 to 2021 fiscal year. This was driven by gold, which is its largest share. A former Guinean minister has been imprisoned and another placed under judicial suspicion in Conakry for embezzlement of public funds and corruption, a special prosecutor's office announced on Tuesday evening. The former budget minister under Alpha Conde, Ismail Jabate, was placed under warrant in the Conakry prison, and the former Minister of State and Special Advisor to the presidency during this period. Thibaut Camara, placed under judicial supervision, said a statement from the prosecutor's office of the Court of Repression of Economic and Financial Offences. Mr. Jobate and Mr. Camara appeared Tuesday before the investigation chambers of the chief and are prosecuted for embezzlement of public funds, money laundering, corruption, and compliancy, said in the statement signed by its special prosecutor, Ali Toure, the chief, created by the military who overthrew President Kandeh on September 5th. Libya security threats delay vote on new government, Njie reports.
On Wednesday, the president of the Libyan High Council of State said that a gunfire was heard after a power outage occurred during a session of forming a new government. The members of the Libyan High Council of State survived a sit-in on Wednesday. The Tripoli-based institution opened a session on forming a new government when a power outage occurred and a gunfire was heard, leading to the adjournment of the session due to the presence of a security threat. Later on, the president of the High Council of State addressed the incident, saying there was a shooting, but thank God we had taken all measures before we went out to secure the exit of members through the back door of the Islamic Society building. The council began an official session on Wednesday to resolve its decision and its final position on changing the executive authority and forming a new government led by Fatih Bahasha. Njie reporting for VOD.
Russian forces invaded Ukraine by land, air, and sea on Thursday, confirming the worst fear of the West, with the biggest attack by one state against another in Europe since World War II. Russian missiles rained down on Ukrainian cities. Ukraine reported columns of troops pouring across its borders into the eastern Kharkiv of Luhansk region and landing by sea at the port cities of Odessa and Mariupol in the south. Explosions could be heard before dawn in the capital Kyiv. Gunfire rattled, siren bled across the city, and the highway out became choked with traffic as residents tried to flee. This is a war of aggression. Ukraine will defeat itself and will win. The world can and must stop Putin. The time to act is now. EU Foreign Affairs Chief Borrell said, "These are among the darkest hours of Europe since the Second World War." A resident of Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv, the closest big city to the Russian borders, said windows in apartment blocks were shaken from constant blasts. 12 hours after Russia launched a full-scale assault on Ukraine, the US responded by implementing additional sanctions. Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences.
We are united in our opposition to Russian aggression, and we're united in our resolve to defend our NATO alliance, and we're united in our understanding of the urgency and seriousness of the threat Russia is making to global peace and stability. Yesterday, the world heard clearly the full extent of Vladimir Putin's twisted rewrite of history, going back more than a century, as he waxed eloquently, noting that, well, I'm not going to go into it, but nothing in Putin's lengthy remarks indicate any interest in pursuing real dialogue on European security in the year 2022. He directly attacked Ukraine's right to exist. He indirectly threatened territory formerly held by Russia, including nations that today are thriving democracies and members of NATO. He explicitly threatened war unless his extreme demands were met. And there's no question that Russia is the aggressor. So we're clear-eyed about the challenges we're facing. Nonetheless, there is still time to avert the worst-case scenario that will bring untold suffering to millions of people if they move as suggested. The United States and our allies and partners remain open to diplomacy if it is serious. When all is said and done, we're going to judge Russia by its actions, not its words. And whatever Russia does next, we're ready to respond with unity, clarity, and conviction. We'll probably have more to say about this as it moves on. I'm hoping diplomacy is still available. Thank you.
U.S. President Joe Biden says, describing the invasion as a premeditated attack without provocation, justification, and necessity. Invasion as a premeditated attack without provocation, justification, and necessity. U.S. trucker convoys prompt National Guard deployment in Washington. Njie reports.
The U.S. is to deploy hundreds of unarmed National Guard troops to Washington ahead of the arrival of trucker convoys protesting against pandemic restrictions. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin approved a request from the District of Columbia government and the U.S. Capitol Police for 700 troops. Around 25 separate convoys plan to join forces and converge on a national capital to replicate recent protests in Canada. The standoff there paralyzed Ottawa for days. The National Guard troop will man traffic pairs and provide command and control from Saturday until 7th of March, a statement said. Some 50 light tactical vehicles will station 24 hours a day, it added. The troop will not carry firearms or take part in law enforcement. The U.S. Capitol Police said several truckers' convoys were planning to converge on Washington around the time of the President Joe Biden's State of the Union address on 1st of March. Njie reporting for VOD.
Nicaragua court convicts government critics of conspiracy. Haddijatou reports.
A court in Nicaragua has found 7 critics of the government of the President Daniel Ortega guilty of conspiracy in what human rights groups have denounced as a political trial. Among those convicted are 3 opposition leaders who had planned to run in the 2021 elections. Government critics were detained in the run-up to the poll in which Mr. Ortega won a 5th term. The prosecution has asked for sentence ranging between 8 and 13 years. In a trial held at El Chipote prison behind closed doors, the judge found the 7 guilty of conspiracy to undermine national integrity.
This is Haddijatou reporting for VOD.
Three ex-mini policemen present at the death of George Floyd denies the unarmed black man of his civil rights, a jury has found. The officers were charged with showing deliberate indifferences to Mr. Floyd's. Serious medical needs during the attempted arrest in May 2020. To Chow, 36, J. Alexandra, 28, and Thomas Lane, 38, all testified in their own defense in the trial. They said they did not realize Mr. Floyd needed medical care at that time. Violating a person's civil rights carries various punishments, but prosecutors have recommended 25 years in federal prison for each man. Derek Cleven, the former police officer who was filmed kneeling on Mr. Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes, is currently serving a 22.5-year sentence. Derek was found guilty of Mr. Floyd's murder last April. He also pleaded guilty in December to his own federal civil rights charges as part of the plea agreement. Over 4 weeks of testimony, prosecutors argued that human decency and common sense should have compelled the men to take action to prevent Mr. Floyd's death. On May 25th, Minneapolis police officers arrested George Floyd, a 46-year-old black man, after a convenience store employee called 911 and told the police that Mr. Floyd had bought cigarettes with a counterfeit $20 bill. 17 minutes after the first squad car arrived at the scene, Mr. Floyd was unconscious and pinned beneath 3 police officers, showing no sign of life. By combining videos from bystanders and security cameras, reviewing official documents, and consulting experts, the New York Times reconstructed in detail the minutes leading to Mr. Floyd's death. Our video shows officers taking a series of actions that violates the policies of the Minneapolis Police Department and turned fatal, leaving Mr. Floyd unable to breathe, even as he and onlookers called out for help. That's all we have for you today until we come your way again. I am Glorious Haddijatou Njie on the VOD Weekly News Recap. Have a good evening.